Okay, so I'm painting this cat cake today. This little guy here. It's a cake I baked the other day of an orange cat. I like to say it's my friend Sabrina's cat Patrick, but yeah, I think a lot of orange cats kind of look the same. So I've got a couple oranges on the palette. One is actually yellow, cadmium yellow deep, pyrrole orange, which is like this really saturated orange I've been loving lately, and then burnt umber. Just bring everything down a little bit and add a little bit of darkness for the shadows. Just using a glass slab as the palette. And then, of course, titanium white. This one is actually titanium white and zinc white mixed together. I find it works really well. It's not quite as intense as titanium white, and the actual texture is better. So I will show you how it goes along.
So I've obviously already begun this painting a few days ago. I'm just picking it up here and deciding to film this process, so apologies for the bit that I missed already. I will show you the rest of it as best I can. You'll see as it goes along. I struggle a little bit with the light here, but I'll explain that in a moment.
Okay, so I'm having a bit of problems right now because the black here is still really wet. So I'm trying to blend the shadows in, and it's kind of getting picked up by the orange paint. Where's my finger? There it is. Kind of getting picked up by the orange paint and smearing a bit, which sometimes is really nice. I like that kind of blended effect. But the black is just such a powerful pigment, it's carbon black, that it's like muddying the orange, and every time it gets on my brush I have to like fully clean the brush, or else I will get this like ugly grayish orange instead of this nice frosting orange that I want. So I'm gonna break my own rule. Normally I work top left to bottom right, and that's because I'm right-handed and I don't want to smear my own paint while I'm working. But I think I'm gonna leave this for now, and do the frosting kind of down here at the minute, pretty much from here onward. I'm just trying to avoid going right around this black. I'll come back and I'll do that once it's dry, and that way I can put that orange kind of right up to it and next to it without getting any black paint on my brush. So we'll kind of go back to this orange color, maybe a bit of the white kind of frosting. I think there's some on the cat's chest. And then once that black dries, it'll be a lot easier to go over top.
So it ended up being mostly that white frosting that I was working on for this section, which is like a little bit boring to watch because it's mostly the same color. So apologies. I'm going to switch over to our kitchen soon to paint that orange, and you'll see the lighting's a lot better in there. And here we go in the kitchen now, from here on out pretty much. The lighting's a lot nicer to paint in the kitchen at this time of year because the kitchen faces south, and we live in the southern hemisphere, so that is your non-bright direct light side of the house. So maybe I should just move my studio with the year. I don't know. Either way, I ended up painting the rest of this one in the kitchen, and you'll see it goes through a couple cycles of daylight because it takes me a while to make these paintings. So this was over the course of a few days, picking it up, putting it down, just trying to be mindful to film the whole time, which is new to me. So hopefully you can get a sense of how this painting progresses. So this is quite sped up, about 32 times sped up for the most part. A couple clips are a little bit less, but that's the general speed at which I paint. This cat painting it's a cat cake, if that wasn't obvious, hopefully it is. So it's a cake from the Australian Women's Weekly Party Cakes for All Occasions book, which was a really fun, weird cookbook that came out in the 90s, 1990 I think, in Australia. And it was printed all over. I actually had a copy as a kid, even though I grew up in Canada. So this was one of the cakes from that book. I really like the frosting. Like, it's a pretty simple cake. It doesn't have any crazy decorations. It's just frosting and licorice. But I liked how much texture the frosting had on it. And I kind of wanted to see how that would come out in oil painting. So that's why I chose this cake. And it's kind of cute. I had an orange cat as a kid. My friend Sabrina has an orange cat, like I mentioned, named Patrick. I think a lot of people have an orange cat, and they have like a special personality, I think. Orange cats, they're pretty silly, stupid sometimes. So I thought it would be fun to paint an orange cat cake. And just to see how this frosting texture would go, I've been playing with it for a little while now. The last one I did was a teddy bear cake, and it had this fluffy frosting as well, and it worked out really well. It gives it really a lot of texture, and when you look at the painting once it's all finished, it has this feeling like it should be 3D, and it's kind of like hard for your brain to wrap around it. It's called trompe-l'œil. It's a famous like French word for trick of the eye. It's a style of painting where you make something look 3D and it's not. So some artists will paint like a piece of sticky tape stuck on their canvas. You really think it's real sticky tape on there, but it's not. It's actually just painted on. So that is kind of the style of painting I was using for this. It all falls within realism, so it's all just painting things that look realistic. You'll probably catch it in a few of the clips that I do work from a photo, which is why my jumper has a photo of the completed painting on it. I'm not telling the future, I just had this jumper made, or my partner made it, while I had the photo done, but not the painting, so it kind of was perfect. I was able to wear this future telling jumper while I painted this. So yeah, so just working on the orange paint here for the frosting. It really kind of pops on this cake once the black licorice gets painted in, as you can see there. And the orange frosting in the lower part of the main body here started to get a little bit tedious. You can see I'm getting distracted just because there is so much space there to get lost in. It's really easy to kind of orient yourself when you're next to like a hard reference point, like a piece of licorice or like the eye or a different feature like that. Sometimes when your only point of reference is other sections of the same color frosting, it can be really easy to get lost in the painting and kind of forget where you are. So this is sometimes here where I go pretty slowly because I'm just trying to work out where exactly I am. And then just painting that black licorice in once I finish the orange around it. That way, if I do pick up a bit of the other color on my brush, it's not a big deal. That black pigment is so strong that if a bit of my orange paint gets on my brush while I'm painting the black, it just gets completely obliterated by the black, and it's fine. But if you go the other way, as I said, the black kind of mixes in with the orange, and then if you try to paint any other orange, it just looks really bad. It's really obvious. So I'm obviously working from a photo here. You can see it on the right of the screen, but that's a photo that I took. So in the process of making these paintings, I bake the actual cake from the book, follow the recipe for the most part. Sometimes I make some changes just to make it tastier or lactose-free or whatever. And then I photograph the cake. I like having my own reference photos to work from. They have a lot more resolution, obviously, than the actual cookbook photo does. I can kind of zoom in to my heart's content. Usually the size I paint at, which is about 40 inches tall, so 102 centimeters tall. That size is plenty of space to work. Like if I take a photo myself, I should say, the resolution is high enough. So I don't need any more detail out of the photo. Whereas sometimes if I'm painting something that size and I'm trying to work from a photo that someone else took or a book photo or something like that, I can't quite get enough detail, and so the painting ends up looking a little bit weird and fake. Ideally, for me, I like to have more detail in the photo than I actually get in the painting, and then I can kind of choose how extreme I want to go in detail. So for this one, it's not actually all that detailed. Like, I'm using fairly small brushes, but they get a lot smaller than that. So if I was going for perfect photorealism, like completely unable to tell that it's a painting, I would crack out my tiny brushes that are like, you know, a couple of hairs, and I would get in there really tight, and I would paint on something a lot smoother than canvas. I would probably use wood, primed and sanded to be really smooth, and that way you can get really fine detail. But it's always a balance between time and realism. I like things to look realistic, but at the same time, I really like that moment when people go up close to the painting and they look at it really close up and they can see all the brush strokes, and it's suddenly really obviously a painting. And I think I would lose that if I went too hard on detail. There's some paintings I've done really detailed just because they were small and they were on wood, and they're really nice, but they do have a different quality. Like, you have to almost touch your nose to the surface of them to be able to tell that it's painted. And I would prefer people to be able to tell without having to actually like touch the painting. Like, if they can just kind of stand right up close to it and see it, that's probably the best balance for me in terms of realism. I do like when things look realistic, but sometimes it can be a little bit frustrating. I've seen people kind of walk past my paintings before and then come and talk to me later for other reasons and say, yeah, that was a really cool photo. That's nice. It's cool that you make the cake, or something like that. And they had no idea that I painted it. So sometimes that can be a little bit of a challenge when you paint realism. It can be nice if you can add an element that makes it obvious that it's a painting, like a bit that's painted a lot like looser, so it's more obviously painted, or some kind of scribbly aspects. There's a lot of different artists doing different things in that space to kind of tie together realism and kind of a more painterly quality. So that's something I'm always thinking about and experimenting with, but I haven't quite found the perfect way to combine painting and realistic and non-realistic elements. So if you have any ideas, shoot them my way. I'm open to trying things. I just really like painting. And I really like when it looks realistic and like a cake, and it's just delicious. It's something that doesn't often get painted in super high detail, especially like a kind of rough home done cake like this. That's why I like to paint them and spend the time painting them in oils. It's just not something that often gets that kind of treatment. You see portraits painted really realistically, and it seems really obviously like worthy of spending a lot of time on painting a beautiful portrait of somebody that's well respected. But I don't know, cakes are pretty important to me too. They're a pretty cool food, and I like that they're made just for special occasions. So this is kind of my way of celebrating the cakes. And because I actually get to make these cakes before I paint them, it's like I have a memory with it. Like I ate it and I shared it with my friends and I watched them eat it. So it feels kind of like a funeral for the cake when I'm painting it like this. I get to kind of remember the cake and what it was like baking it and what it tasted like, and slowly paint it. And then once the painting's done, I feel like I'm kind of finished with it. I've had my moment with that cake. I got to eat it and paint it. And so now it can go and live on somewhere else in the world. So we're closing in on the end of the painting here. You can see I'm finishing up the rough kind of edges around the outside of the orange frosting and getting into what was definitely my favorite bit, which was the little feet on the cat. They're so fun to paint, and they came together so quickly compared to the orange frosting. I think just because it was really bite-sized areas of frosting that I was working on between its little toes. So it's really easy not to get lost and confused, and you can just find your way with the paint really quickly. And with that kind of white vanilla frosting, I was really enjoying working with those colors. It's kind of like a nice yellowy gray for the shadows, and then just like a lightened version of it for the highlights. So really easy to mix, really quick to work with and make more of. So it's just like really pleasant to paint. It didn't really feel like I was fighting with anything. It all just kind of came together quickly. And I just kind of outlined the shadows, the ridges between the little frosting swoops, and then I just worked the lights in between them. So I'm finishing up the tail there. And then the bit that makes it all come together is the licorice, I think. So adding in that black at the very end just really makes it pop. It makes all the shadows make sense. So those darker areas that I had painted in kind of underneath the licorice, they all just start to kind of suddenly become something right before your eyes as you paint in the licorice. And I really like that process. There's not a lot of quick moments like that in oil painting that happen so quickly and so satisfying. And the last step I do is I just take a little bit of white on my brush and I work it into the black on the licorice just to give it a little bit of a shine and a highlight, and texture it so that it's obviously licorice and not like a really black, bold outline. You can tell that it's actually part of the cake and it's part of food, and it has its own light source. Look at those little toes! How cute are they? By far the best part of the painting process so far.
Awesome! Our cat's done, mostly done. I'm gonna add some little details into the fur in the frosting, just to give some of it a little bit more depth, but I think it's pretty good. I'm quite happy with where it's at, and we're covered. So I work kind of from top to bottom, left to right, and once that's done, I rarely go back over and add details and glaze and things like that. It's just not the way my brain works. I don't tend to work in layers. So usually once everything's covered, it's about as much as I'm gonna do on it. So we're there, which is exciting because that means it's time for the black. And for that, breaking out the big guns, caulking gun of paint. I use a lot of black paint, so I can't use the little like 37 mil tubes. I would go through them too fast. Even the 150 mil tubes, I go through pretty fast. So I get these. So they fit in a caulking gun, and you can squeeze out a ton of paint. They're super heavy, They're from Langridge, and they're just, this one's Mars Black. I actually used Manganese Black, but they didn't have any, so we're gonna use Mars Black for this one, and hopefully it doesn't look that weird if it's hung next to all the other ones with Manganese Black. It might, we'll see. But yeah, we just pop it in, squeeze out a bunch of paint, I'll show, and then I mix it with a bunch of medium because I like it to be really slick and almost enamel-like and finished without any brush strokes. So I'll squeeze this on the palette, I'll mix it with medium, and then I'll paint the whole background. I paint around the cat first, or around the cake, and then I paint the rest of the background. So I'll show you what that looks like. I forgot that when you take the cap off of these, they're sealed. Nothing comes out. So you have to cut it off with like a Stanley knife. So I'm gonna do that very carefully, and then I'm gonna mix up my black paint.
Oopsie. Yeah, this is a new tube of paint. Sometimes they do that. They have oil sitting at the top of them, so when you go to squeeze out all the paint, it just explodes everywhere. I should have seen that coming, but I didn't for whatever reason, so there we go. That's what happens. And like I said, I'm just mixing this up with some medium. I like it to be really slick and smooth, and I kind of go by feel, kind of like an Italian grandma who knows how to make pasta by feel, but not by measurements. Same. I wish this was repeatable, but it depends on the pigment. So even compared to the manganese black I normally use, this would have used a different amount of medium to what that was. So you kind of go by feel and you get a sense of what it feels like under the palette knife, and that will kind of translate to how it feels on the brush and on the canvas. So this is one that I just picked up after painting black backgrounds for years. Finally know exactly how I like that black to feel. It's coming down to the right texture now. I can see it kind of mixing up and settling and kind of all the details falling out of that black paint. So now I'm pretty much ready to go with my painting. I really love this part of the painting. At the very end, when I do the black background and all the kind of detail and hard work is finished, it feels awesome. It takes a little bit of time, especially for bigger paintings with lots of detail, but I just put on a podcast I love or listen to some music and just kind of get into the flow of things. It's one of the few times while I'm painting that I don't really ever get distracted. It's super focus intensive just because you're going around those little edges and you want to make sure you don't miss anything or paint over anything. So it kind of captures just enough of your attention to keep you engaged. But it's still somehow really interesting, even though it's just black. And it really starts to come together, like all the shadows just start to make sense when you add the black at the end, and it just pops, especially for transparent things like jellies and stuff like that. Adding the black is just like a completely magical transformation, and it completely changes the whole painting. So I like to watch that happen before my eyes while I listen to some good tunes and just enjoy the final moment of the painting process. I hope you've enjoyed watching the process behind this cat cake painting. I really liked making it, and even though filming it was a bit of a challenge sometimes because I'm not really used to filming as I work, I hope that it's paid off and that you get something out of it. And if there's anything you want to see that I didn't show, please let me know. I'm planning to make more videos in the future, just for like recording my own process, if anything. Thank you so much for watching.